Meeting called to order at 5:05 p.m.
Welcome, everyone, to the September 17th, 2025 regular meeting of the Richmond Rent Board. As a courtesy to others, we ask that you please silence your cell phones or any type of noise devices. Also, I have a few reminders regarding public comments. Individuals who would like to address the board, a request to speak card must be given to the assistant clerk before the announcement of the agenda item. If you would like to speak on an item not listed on the agenda or on the consent calendar, you must do so under the public forum. Please refer to the Rent Board meeting agenda for the list of items or the agenda items list open for public comment posted above the table located in front of the chambers. Also, this meeting is being interpreted. We ask anyone addressing the board to speak clearly and slowly for interpretation. The first item on the agenda is pledge to the flag. Please join me in pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right in time. Okay. The next item on the agenda is roll call. For the purpose of the recording, may I please get an audible roll call from Rent Board members and staff? Board Member Espinoza.
Here.
Board Member Height.
Here.
Board Member Willis.
Here.
Vice Chair Cantor.
Here.
Chair Tipton.
Here.
Executive Director Nicholas Traylor.
Here.
Deputy Director Fred Tran.
Here.
And General Counsel Charles Oshanuga.
Here.
For the record, all board members, Rent Board members, and staff are present. The next item on the agenda is statement of conflict of interest. Are there any? Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is agenda review. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Are there any changes to the agenda from staff?
No changes.
Are there any other changes to the agenda from board members?
Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is public forum. Tonight, we have one speaker. The speaker shall be allowed up to 4 minutes to address the board. When your name is called to address the board, stating your name and city of residence is optional. Please terminate your address to the board when your time expires. We ask that you keep your comments respectful and appropriate. The only speaker is Mr. Cordell Hindler.
So I'll take this one. So good evening, Chair Tipton, board members. For the record, I am Cordell Hindler, and I'm a Richmond resident. So first, I do want to welcome Board Member Willis for the Rent Board. It was an easy process, so I'm glad we have an extra seat that is filled. So that's the good news. But coming up this Friday, you are all invited to the Richmond Rotary Club weekly meeting, and our speaker for that meeting will be Charles Gerard, who will be sharing with us about what are some of the activities going along around the port. And it's $35, and that includes lunch too. So that's one. And then also coming up this Saturday is the Spirit and Soul Festival from 11 a.m. until 5 p.m. at the corner lot on McDonald, and it's free, no charge. But coming up on October the 2nd, you're invited to the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference hosted by the City of Martinez, but you must, I repeat, you must RSVP by September 26th, so that way they can tally to see how many people will be in attendance. So it's only $70 per person. That includes dinner too. So the fourth thing is I'm very glad that we got to separate the hearings on regular agendas, because I find it to be very cumbersome, because having it scheduled hearing, take place in a regular agenda seems not fitting, because if we have special meetings, devoted to that for public hearings, I figure that would be appropriate. So that's just, we got to keep that pattern going, long term, because sitting through having a public hearing on a regular agenda seems a bit cumbersome. So that's just, food for thought. And so with that, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. That was the last speaker. The next item on the agenda is to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
That was Vice Chair Cantor,
Is there a second?
I second.
and that was Board Member Espinoza.
Madam Clerk, let's take a vote.
Board Member Espinoza,
Yes.
Board Member Height,
Yes.
Board Member Willis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cantor,
Yes.
and Chair Tipton.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay. The next item on the agenda is item G1 under regulations. Item G1 is to amend the following Chapter 8 regulations. Number 1, Regulation 801, amended to clarify the petitioner carries the burden of proof and establishes the burden of proof as preponderance of evidence. Number 2, Regulation 804, amended to clarify that the preliminary review of a petition is limited to procedural content and not substantive content. Additionally, the amendment would clarify the basis of finding a petition unacceptable and describes the steps a petitioner would need to take to fix a petition that is found unacceptable. Finally, the regulation would allow the staff to administratively dismiss without prejudice those petitions that have been found to be unacceptable and left uncorrected. There are no speakers on this item.
Thank you. We will now hear the staff report.
Good evening, Chair Tipton and members of the Rent Board, and again, welcome new board member Melvin Willis. Tonight, I'll be presenting proposed amendments to Chapter 8 of the Rent Board regulations. These changes are designed to strengthen the efficiency and effectiveness of the petition and hearings process, while aligning more closely with the rent ordinance. At its August 27th meeting, the Rent Board directed staff to revise Chapter 8. The goal was to make the petition and hearings process clearer, faster, and more effective. Staff has prepared a set of amendments that address gaps and improve clarity in several key areas. Usually the recommended action is at the end, but we'll do it now. Actually, we'll skip that and come back. Let's go to fiscal impact. So these proposed amendments do not have any fiscal impact, and as they are procedural improvements only. In terms of background, hearing staff are always looking for ways to improve service delivery while maintaining efficiency. The proposed amendments are part of a broader series of improvements that staff intend to bring forward over time. Tonight's changes are the first in that series, focused specifically on improving clarity in the petition and hearings process. So the first issue is Regulation 801. Currently, Regulation 801 does not specify what standard of proof is required in a hearing. This can cause confusion for both petitioner and respondents. The amendment clarifies that the petitioner has the burden of proof and that the standard is the preponderance of evidence, essentially meaning that the claim being made is more likely than not to be true. Issue number 2 relates to Regulation 804. Regulation 804 covers petition filing but does not provide clear procedures for dismissing petitions that don't meet requirements. The amendment would limit review to procedural defects only, not substantive claims, define what makes a petition unacceptable, such as missing signatures or jurisdictional errors, sets deadlines for petitioners to correct problems, allows administrative dismissals without prejudice if issues aren't corrected, And this is, again, meant to ensure efficiency while protecting the right to refile. Issue number 3 have to do with regulations 822 and 844. At present, hearing examiners have very limited ability to resolve matters without holding a hearing, even when the facts are clear. The proposed amendments allow examiners to issue decisions without hearings if the record contains undisputed facts. It also extends their decision window from 120 days to 150 days, giving them more time to evaluate cases carefully. It also removes subpoena powers, which align more closely with the rent ordinance. So again, the proposed amendments are meant to strengthen procedural clarity, improve efficiency, and align regulations more closely with the rent ordinance. And if we could go, there we are. So staff is recommending amendments to 4 regulations in Chapter 8. Regulation 801 clarifies that the petitioner has the burden of proof, defined as the preponderance of evidence. Regulation 804 maintains how petitions are reviewed, ensures fairness, and allows for dismissals when procedural requirements are not met. And Regulation 822 gives hearing examiners the authority to issue decisions without holding a hearing if the facts are undisputed. And finally, Regulation 844 extends the time frame for decisions from 120 days to 150 days, allowing for a more thoughtful review. And, and with that, Charles Oshinunga, our General Counsel, and myself and Fred are available for any questions the board may have.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions from members of the board? I have an initial procedural question, which is just that the item G1 here only includes the first 2, Regulation 801 and 804, but the agenda and obviously the presentation also include 822 and 844. Is that difference significant?
I have 822, 844 in my packet on attachment 1.
It was the portion that Cindy had read aloud. I think it was all in the agenda, but I just want to make sure it's reflected in the record.
Where is it?
Okay, it's in the agenda, but Cindy, your copy and mine only had 801 and 804. So, no worries.
It was on page 2 of the agenda.
Perfect. I just want to make sure that the record is reflecting that we're talking about all 4. No problem. No problem. We're just special. Okay. All 4 are included.
Chair, if I may, there are some things though. When I looked through this regulation just today, there are some changes that I think need to happen to the changes I'm suggesting. So I can identify the changes here, and if the board is willing, the board can direct staff to put this item with the changes on the September 30th meeting on the consent calendar for approval. Typically, when you make changes during meetings, if the changes are more clerical in nature, you can adopt it right there and then. But if they're substantive, it's probably best practice to re-agendize it for potential public input. And so, if I can just direct everyone's attention, it's the attachment, item G1, attachment 1, page 2, page 205. It's on the very top. And the sentence starts in the previous page. It reads, additionally, petitions where the impacted unit does not fall within the rent board's jurisdiction or is otherwise exempt from rent control will not be considered acceptable. So the change I'm suggesting is to remove the phrase "or is otherwise exempt from rent control." That's not consistent with how things work. If the unit is within our jurisdiction, we still hear some petitions that are not necessarily rent controlled, such as relocation petitions. And so I don't want this language to confuse that. So I'm suggesting we remove that, just that phrase. There are some clerical things that I'll point out, but they don't necessarily need the board's approval, but just so everyone knows when they see that change, perhaps. It's the same page. It's C, as in Charles. It is the last sentence. It starts with, or the second to last sentence, it starts with an, A-N. I'll read the prior sentence first. Where a petitioner makes such a request, staff shall respond in writing that their request has been granted, and they shall have an additional 5 business days to refile their petition. Period. An additional 5 business days shall be measured from the day that staff sends a written response to petitioner, plus an additional 5 calendar days if staff mailed their written response to petitioner. I think that's kind of confusing. What I'm suggesting is to remove the word an, A-N, and just replace it with the article THE, just for clarity's sake. And the last change is on page 2. Same page. It's D as in dog, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's on the 5th line down. The sentence starts with after. Actually, the 4th line down, sorry. The sentence starts with after. After the petitioner time to refile expires, staff shall send a notice of administrative dismissal to the petitioner, informing the petitioner of the basis of dismissal. Additionally, the notice shall inform the petitioner that the dismissal is without prejudice, and then it explains what that means. And I'm just suggesting removing the phrase informing the petitioner of the basis of the dismissal. And I'm suggesting that because of the earlier sentences, which state that where a petitioner fails to correct an unacceptable petition within the requisite time, dismissal of the petition occurs as a natural consequence. Staff need not take formal action to dismiss the petition, but rather the dismissal occurs after the petitioner's time to refile expires. So the basis of the dismissal will always be you failed to respond on time. So that the following sentence really doesn't, it's not coherent when read in context. So I'm just suggesting to remove that phrase. And those are the changes that I would make, and then we can re-agendize it on the consent calendar.
And let me add one additional extremely clerical level edit, which would be same page 2 of 5, bullet C, on the second line. If I'm reading it correctly, I think that should be identifying instead of identify. Informing the petitioner of the basis of their finding and identifying any procedural defects.
Okay.
Procedurally here, what makes sense? Does anyone feel that any of those changes are more than clerical, such that they warrant full discussion at the next meeting? Is that an approach that makes sense to check with?
Sure.
Okay.
So, sorry, my understanding of your recommendation, Charles, was that it was your assessment that the changes were substantive enough that this would need to come back at the next meeting.
That's right.
Rather than, so.
On the consent calendar, though.
That's right.
Yes. Oh, okay. So you're asking, it doesn't need to come back as a full agenda item or just on consent? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Got it. I understand now.
I'm sorry, Chair, was there a question you had asked?
So it doesn't sound like anyone thinks we need to bring any of those specific edits back as a full item. It sounds like they'll be fine, clerically addressed consent calendar. Okay. I think all of those sound good and can be addressed through consent calendar next meeting. So in terms of more substantive changes, I had one question. Also, background for Board Member Willis is that we also discussed these preliminary version of these edits at some length last month. So I did have questions about Regulation 844. Just if staff could provide a little bit more background on or context for why the decision to remove or why the suggestion to remove subpoena power, and also the reason for extending the timeline from 120 to 150 days.
Yes, sure. So Regulation 822, number 2, says that the hearing examiner has the power to grant requests for subpoenas and to order production of evidence. And that particular regulation appears to be in conflict with the rent ordinance. And I'm going to just pull up the section. 11.100.060E, powers and duties, which specifically reserves the powers to issue a subpoena to the board. So when the rent board has that power, the regulation can describe how the rent board exercises that power. You know, I'm not sure how staff would figure that out, but you can create regulations around a party's ability to get to the rent board during, prior to their hearing happening and requesting that the rent board actually issued a subpoena and doing it that way. But as it's written, the hearing examiner doesn't have that power. And just for a little bit of background, we've had this issue come up maybe twice where parties are trying to enforce a subpoena that has been issued by the hearing examiner, and they're running up against the wall where the third party is saying, I'm not going to comply with that. And after some research, they are correct. There has to be, it has to be done in a way where you can point directly to a statute that's giving that body that power to do that. So it's better to be issued by the board in order to enforce the subpoena. And then in terms of Regulation 844 to expand the days from 120 to 150, first, the regulation not only does that, it also clarifies that the hearing examiner is the one that's bound by that timeline and not the board. How the regulation is written, before all the changes, it said that the board shall take a final action on any individual adjustment petition within 120 days following the date of proper filing, et cetera. But the board doesn't take actions on petitions. They take actions on appeal. The board doesn't hear petitions, they hear appeals. So I think the original drafter of this perhaps might have conflated the two. So I had to make sure we clarify that it's actually the hearing examiner that's required to do that. Then the 120 days extension to 150 days was to address the issue that was happening on the ground level. So a party comes, a tenant or a landlord comes to the rent board and they file a petition. How we have been doing it is that the hearing unit staff and the hearing examiner will look at the petition, and they would look at it for whether or not the petition was incomplete. Did it have the signatures and things of that nature? But occasionally the hearing examiner would also look at it for adequacy, whether or not it was adequate. And it's unclear to me exactly what that means, but I think it meant more of a substantive review. And I'm assuming the basis of doing that is to ensure that when the entire file actually got to the hearing examiner, and by entire file, I mean to say that when the petition and the landlord's objections not landlords, but the respondent's objections got to the hearing examiner, that the case would already be in a state to proceed immediately, that there would be no time delay. These regulations that have been proposed would alter what we've been currently doing. Some of the regulations, if I point you to, for instance, it's Regulation 804E. So that's on page 2. It says, to promote unbiased hearings, the hearing examiner shall not be a part of the preliminary review process and shall only begin reviewing the petition after either one, staff has received the respondent's response to the petition, or two, the respondent's time to respond has expired. And so now that you've removed the hearing examiner from the initial review process, that case, when it actually gets to the hearing examiner's desk, might not be in a state where they can immediately go on to a hearing. But, and so we have to, in the context of how the regulations is working, there's that time that's ticking, right? The 120-day time limit. And so just to allow for, just to recognize that the case might not be where it needs to be, we thought it would be prudent to add an additional 30 days. And if you go back to Regulation 822, number 6, we changed that regulation as a way to balance the issues I just described as well. And that regulation says to decide the petition administratively without, I'm sorry, let me start again. The hearing examiner has the power to decide the petition administratively without a hearing if the record contains sufficient undisputed facts to render a decision on the petition without hearing live testimony. Now that's a significant change from what it was before. Before, the hearing examiner could only issue an administrative decision, that is to say, a decision without a hearing, if there is no hearing requested by the petitioner, the responding party fails to timely file an objection, and the record is sufficient. So those three elements, and that was extraordinarily restrictive. I don't think the hearing examiner has ever had an opportunity to exercise their power under Part 6 of this regulation. So we just try to give the hearing examiner two tools to help work through some of the things that the hearing examiner was trying to work through during the preliminary review stage, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. That's very helpful. My concern with I didn't have a concern with the subpoena power. I just wanted context, if that makes sense. My concern with the time extension was, we hear a limited number of appeals, but nobody seems to come and complain that this process moves too quickly and efficiently. But I think on the balance, your explanation makes clear that overall, we should be increasing efficiency with the administrative dismissals becoming more predictable and on a better known timeline, and then also these, I forget the right term, but where there are sufficient undisputed facts, being able to resolve those petitions without a hearing. I feel like the offset of those two changes allays my concerns about the 30-day extension. So that makes sense. Thank you for explaining.
I guess just a clarifying question is how long do petitioners have to file an appeal if they're unsatisfied with the hearing officer's determination?
30 days from the date that the appeal was sent, plus 5 days if it's mailings. We typically give everyone 35 days.
And at the risk of potentially asking the obvious, like the hearing examiner and other people are saying, hey, if you want to file an appeal, go right here and do it, because I know sometimes if someone doesn't explicitly tell you that, you may not think that that's something you need to do. So, because the only thing that was, I'm getting caught up, but the only thing that gave me a little bit pause is I can understand undisputed facts, but coming from the background and hearing some complaints in the past about hearing examiner's decision, sounds like some of that context does matter for people whenever they're filing a petition. So I just want to make sure folks are getting every opportunity to know, like, hey, these are the steps you can take without having to just kind of figure it out and navigate the system blindly.
Yes, we definitely, when the decision is sent out, the cover page tells them they have a right to an appeal, and the cover page also tells them the date, like how many days you have to appeal. I'm pretty sure it might even say the actual day. Yeah, it has the actual day where your appealing rights expire, the actual date on it. I don't know whether or not they're being informed during the hearing that if you're not satisfied with the decision, you have the right to appeal. But we definitely let them know. And I don't think, I mean, Ms. Shaw can speak to it better than I, but I don't believe that there's been any parties that have complained that they did not know they had that right.
Not to my knowledge. I mean, it's on the decision. It is on the cover page of the decision. It tells you that you, like he mentioned, you have 35 days, and we actually have the date highlighted. So they have the expiration date on the decision. I'm sure you probably saw that in appeal cases that you've heard already, some of you. You'll see the decision from the hearing examiner. You'll see a copy that has the highlighted date on it. And that's their deadline to appeal. And we actually give them until the end of the day. Sometime is it postmarked? We give it.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty liberal.
Yeah.
If you, I mean, the part is to allow
Appeal.
the point is to allow parties to be able to have their cases heard on the merits. And so if you postmark it, or if it's in an email inbox at 11:59 p.m.,
Yes.
we're going to accept it.
Correct.
Yeah, my thing is just making sure folks are informed of their rights and not looking at the decision and being like, wait, I could have appealed this the whole time, man. So I just wanted to make sure that it's being very explicit throughout the process, especially if we're aiming to make it more efficient. Just want to make sure folks have their opportunity if they want to take it. That's all.
Thank you.
I have one other question that it's not about the regs. It's really just background for my interest, because we've seen people appear both representing themselves and represented by counsel. Do you have a rough estimate of how common it is for petitioners in particular to be represented?
I do not, because I don't see that side very often, but Ms. Shaw probably has a better estimate than I.
I would say that the respondents, which are the landlords or the owners or property managers, they're representing more than the tenants. I know at the beginning of the program when we were contracted with Bay Legal, and we had a few. They were represented a few times, but it was really very little, probably like maybe 3.
Great, thank you. I ask just because I don't know that this is anything that needs fixing, but we're adding a lot of clarity. I really like the amendments. I think they do add a lot of clarity and specificity. They also add a lot of legalese, which unfortunately might just be the nature of the beast. I'm familiar with preponderance of evidence and the way it's described here, but like a layperson might not. It still adds more clarity than nothing at all, but it might not be helpful to them. So that's why I ask. That said, it's not a barrier issue for me, but that is helpful to know. Thank you, Cindy.
So, looking at page 2, section C, I just am curious about the additional 5 calendar days for mailing. It sounds like that applies to all notices that are sent out by the program, not just this additional, not just this response to a petitioner's written request. Is that correct?
Just like in general, our practice, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that one thing that I would like is to change it so that the additional 5 business days shall be measured from the day that staff sent their written response to petitioner, period. And then maybe just stating something that says like any timeline for response imposed by the program will be extended by 5 calendar days if the notice from the program is mailed rather than sent electronically or something like that, just to clarify that it's not just about this one timing because it does have there are 2 timelines mentioned within this section. But the way that it's written now, that 5-day extension for mailing seems like it only applies to the second one.
Okay, one more time, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So section C identifies that petitioner has a 10 business day period to refile the petition. It also states that they have an additional 5 business days in response to if they make a written request. And then it names that there's an additional 5 calendar days if staff mailed their written response to the petitioner. So that makes it seem like that additional 5 days added on to the response period for mailing versus electronic service only replies to a written response from staff. And when in fact it applies to both time periods that are mentioned within this section.
What's the first time period again?
The 10 business days to refile the petition, since the written notice of incomplete petition. So if the written notice of incomplete petition is mailed rather than sent via email, then the petitioner would have 10 business days plus 5 calendar days, right?
Got you. Yeah, no, I understand.
And that's not identified in here. So I would rather remove any reference to the additional 5 days for mailing and have that be stated elsewhere as a general policy, or clarify that that applies to both of the time periods
Yeah,
in here.
thank you. Now I understand. Yes, that makes sense. And what I'll do is I'll just create another section, like section, I don't know, H, a standalone section, and just describe that anything mailed by staff, any deadline imposed by staff where it's mailed gets an additional 5 business days or 5 calendar days.
Yeah, I think that because it does appear also to, on page 3, the petition and noticing procedures, like, does that additional 5 days affect 805A5 as well? Or is that because that is the notice to the tenant is sent by the landlord, not by the program?
No, I think, I see what you're saying. Yes, it's because we're not sending the notice. It's the landlord that sends it to the tenant and then files the notice to us.
Okay, and then the same thing for B5, so the notice to the landlord.
What I can do is I can just create a separate regulation.
That's what I was going to suggest, is that I think that there should just be something that is clear that anytime something is sent by the program, if it's sent via email, no additional time is granted. If it's sent only by post, then an additional 5 calendar days are granted.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from the board? Seeing no further questions, Madam Clerk, are there any public speakers?
No, there are no speakers on this item.
May I ask one last question, Chair?
Yes.
I remember Board Member Tomasas had some questions at the last board meeting, and I wasn't really clear about the questions you had. I tried to re-listen to the meeting to figure out what your questions are trying to target, and I want to make sure that the question, I did my best to address what I thought you were asking, but does the regulations address what you were asking, or do you still have some questions around that? Because now is the time. You don't want to vote for something and have it stamped without understanding what's going on or without having your questions answered. So, if you have questions, now's the time.
No, hoy no tengo preguntas. Y sí, sí me contestaste. Lo siento si tal vez yo no entendí bien, pero
Yes, actually, you did answer. Actually, you did answer my question last time that I had questions. So you did.
Okay.
And today I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
In that case, is there a motion?
I guess I can make a motion. First, for General Counsel Oshanuga, is it appropriate to refer to the edits proposed by you as a group rather than naming them all within the motion?
Yeah, that should be fine because I took notes. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so I can just say the edits discussed during this meeting?
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
I don't know.
Yeah.
It was so many.
so I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to revise the regulations with the edits discussed in this meeting and to bring it back on the consent calendar at our next regular meeting, or can it be brought at the special meeting as well?
It could be brought, I can get it finished by the special meeting.
Okay, so to bring it back on the consent calendar at the special meeting on September 30th for board approval.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Chair Cantor and a second by Board Member Willis. I'll take a vote. Board Member Espinoza?
Yes.
Board Member Height?
Yes.
Board Member Willis?
Yes.
Vice Chair Cantor?
Yes.
And Chair Tipton?
Yes.
Motion passes to direct staff to revise the regs with edits and return back at the special meeting on September 30th, and to bring it back onto the, to be on, agendized on the consent calendar. Passes unanimous. The next item on the agenda is reports of officers.
Just want to remind the board that on September 30th, we will be honoring our past board members, so hopefully everybody can attend. We have a small handful of former board members that will be attending, and the other board members will receive their appreciation, their certificate of appreciation by mail. So just want to remind everybody, we'll have light refreshments available also for those who attend. Yeah. Yes.
What time of day on September 30th?
I'll let, it's at
5 o'clock,
5
same
o'clock,
time as this.
Okay, thank you.
And my understanding is that we're also hearing an appeal at that meeting? Okay. And it's going to be in the multipurpose room, not here.
That's correct.
Correct.
Usually on Tuesdays, we're not allowed to use the chambers.
There's no council meeting that day, right?
Yeah, but
they
we
won't
can't-
let us use it?
They won't use it on
Okay.
Tuesdays, just in case something get called in the middle of the day.
Okay. Okay, and so are we doing the honoring of former board members first or the appeal first?
Prob- Probably the appeal first is because the parties are there, and that's my understanding. I don't know. It's up to them.
It's up to the board. I
Yeah.
don't have
However you
an
wanna-
opinion.
Yeah.
ultimately, it's up to the board. And if the board doesn't give any direction to us, we'll choose one way or the other. I think we would put the appeal first, just to get it out of the way. And that way we could enjoy the honoring of the past board members and take our time with it.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I just am hoping that we can let the board members who are coming to be honored know that we won't get to that part until later in the meeting so that they're not arriving at 5 thinking that it's going to start at 5.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Is that all?
Yep.
That's all.
All right. Meeting somehow adjourned at 5:51 p.m.
Yay.